Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Three Trends Causing D&O Rates to Rise webinar. I'm Sherry Branson, Marketing Manager, and I'm not going to be on camera today, as I just wanted to mention we are having some internet issues in the office, but we are able to do today's webinar, so I'm very happy about that. And I'm now joined by Kevin Davis, who is going to be on camera. Kevin joins me from Los Angeles, the founder of Kevin Davis. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Hey, Sherry, I missed you. I like doing this together. So, but hey, look, I'm still looking forward to it. It'll be pretty good. It'll be good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, at least we know what we're doing, Kevin. So we've gone through a few rodeos before. Actually, this is our 8.5 years. Can you believe, of webinars?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we've
A
hardly
lot of
missed
webinars.
a lot of webinars. Yeah, and we haven't missed. I think we've maybe missed. Haven't done one or two over 8.5 years. So we've got a lot of webinars under our belt. And today we're going to be talking about a lot of interesting information that people are wanting to hear about what's going on in the industry and the rates and et cetera. And I did want to mention a couple of things, you guys. On the screen, on the right side of the screen, you see a questions tab. If you type questions in that tab, we'll take some time at the end of today's webinar to answer your questions. And if we don't get to all of them, don't worry. We'll email you or call you after the webinar and answer your questions. And I do record all of our webinars, and I put them on our website, which is kdisonline.com. So you can listen to today's webinar and all of our past webinars as well. So Kevin, we have a great topic today.
Yeah, yep. D&O rates are on the rise. And I'm talking about D&O rates, not just community association rates. I'm talking about rates all over the country. And we're going to talk about what's happening out there, and what's really happening in community associations, why they face these new trends, and what these new trends are, and what are we seeing, and why they're critical to community associations. And we also talk about D&O in terms of what kind of coverage you need to make sure you have to respond to these trends we're going to be talking about today. So it's going to be a pretty exciting webinar. I think one of the unique ones that we've had in a while.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Kevin, community associations have really evolved, and the board members, really, and property managers need more awareness than ever before regarding their duties and responsibilities. They have a lot on their shoulders now. I mean, the number of community associations in the United States has increased from 10,000 associations 40 years ago to more than 350,000 today.
Yeah, and as these community associations mature, the responsibilities of the board of directors continue to evolve. They're becoming more and more complex, which expands their liability, which increases the number of lawsuits against them, and which makes them a little bit easier to be held responsible for.
Absolutely. The board's responsibilities have always included finance, rule enforcement, and maintenance of the association, handling that. And now many of them have to cover protection and the health and safety and the welfare of their community. So they have a lot more of a burden now.
And that's the point, Chair. This has created more exposure to the board, especially now than ever before, because they have to not only uniformly and fairly govern the association, but now they have to worry and be concerned about the health, safety, and welfare of the community. And that was never part of the governing documents. It was never part of what they signed on to.
Absolutely. Whether we're in the pandemic, like the COVID-19 pandemic right now, facing natural disasters such as earthquakes or floods, economic loss, society's concerns, they all affect community associations by basically disrupting their operations.
Yeah. And this disruption that you're talking about here creates a significant challenges to the board because the association documents don't give them authority to handle these situations. Also, even if they had the authority, the people who live in these places say the rules are unenforceable and should not be enforced.
Absolutely. Yeah, these new challenges, which are bigger than ever, the board faces as, they're the caretakers for their community. It's really increased their liability dramatically, and as a result has caused many D&O claims to rise and a need for higher premium, which makes sense. Yeah, and then, exactly. Kevin, I know everybody's anxiously waiting to hear this. We talked about the three trends. So that's what, is our topic today. Can you talk about what the three trends are that are contributing to the increase?
Sure. When we talk about the three trends, we talk about, obviously, COVID-19. We're talking about something new that most people haven't heard about before, but it's called social inflation, which has led to a whole new wave of liability responses that we're seeing. And the third one is an increase in challenges to the board authorities to enforce the documents. The number one job they have is to enforce the association documents, the rules, and the challenges are becoming off the chart.
Absolutely. And basically, this has led for the need to get higher D&O rates. And now COVID-19, I know that a lot of people are wondering, how this is going to affect the industry, et cetera. Let's talk about that a little bit, Kevin.
Sure. COVID-19 has created an incredible challenge to community associations throughout the United States. Because it is now their responsibility to worry about closing pools and gyms and clubhouse and enforce the rules and regulations and ensure they make sound business decisions and sound corporate decisions. And now, again, the health, safety, and welfare of its members, keep them in mind.
Absolutely. And I see, one of the big problems with COVID-19 is many community association boards, they have many unanswered questions regarding it. Every day a new question pops up, more than the answered ones. So they're kind of just winging it to go, to deal with all the issues that are coming up every day.
Yeah, because they don't have that knowledge and experience that they normally should have. These community associations have the power, the emergency powers to close a common area. They do have that,
Yeah, to close the common areas, and they also might even have to close off the entire condominium building and the units to anyone who's not a unit owner or a tenant.
Yeah, and the problem is after you close the pool and gym, and you tell them the reason why you're doing it to protect their health, it's usually not enough. They constantly battle the board, question their authority to restrict access to the association common area. I mean, just a few complaints that we've heard about. These are just a few. Failure to open pools, gym, and the common areas. Failure to have full unrestricted access to facilities, including things like elevators, parking lots, staircases, clubhouses. Failure to allow essential guests from entering the common area into the property itself. Failure to allow vendors who have contracts into the property itself. And failure to have short-term leasing.
Absolutely. And I even hear that some people are looking for a refund in their association fees because they're not able to use the pool or the gym, et cetera. So they're looking for refunds. So that's a problem too.
And one thing is a problem too that we're going to see a lot more of is cybercrime. And this is not a cyber exercise, but right now we know there's 90,000 new COVID-19 domains have been registered. I believe about half those things are fraudulent. So whenever you get, here's an update to COVID-19 to your community, you click on it, you have all kind of potential cyber crimes in there. So right now, COVID has really made it really, really difficult problem because of all different things we just talked about, all different failures that the board of directors can be responsible for, and even some associations ignore all that kind of stuff and still open their facilities while the city, the state, the county tell them to stay closed. They still open them up. They say the pool, is not, it's not part of the city. They say it's private. So, and the problem here is someone catches the virus and claims that occurred while the facility was open. Guess what? You don't have any liability insurance. I mean, you don't have any liability insurance even if they did keep it closed. But the general liability policy has a specific exclusion in there for communicable disease, and a D&O has a very strong bodily injury, sickness, disease, and death exclusion under their policy. So if someone catches that virus in there, that's the kind of problem you're going to have.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then the other side of the coin, Kevin, is if the boards open their facilities in compliance with the health department guidelines and follow them, it can significantly lower the risk of lawsuits being filed against the association.
Yeah. So if someone were to allegedly sue because they contracted the virus from the gym or swimming pool, even though they followed the law, again, what happens is you reduce the liability exposure. But again, you won't have the coverage because of the same reason you had before. It just lowers the exposure ultimately.
Absolutely. And now, Kevin, you used a term earlier, which we've never talked about before in any other webinar in the past 8.5 years. You talked about social inflation, and that's a new term. Can you talk about that a little bit and explain a little bit more in depth what that is?
Sure. Social inflation is one of the new latest buzzwords around there that insurers are using. It's used like when these insurers out there, they describe the rising costs of insurance claims caused by legislative, judicial, social, and economic developments, and resulting in more litigation, broader definition of liability, and larger jury awards. Now, interestingly, Travelers itself has revealed it is raising insurance prices and changing its litigation strategy in response to social inflation.
Interesting. Yeah,
There's
I
been
mean,
several trends out there. All right, yeah, say something, Sherry. Yeah.
oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, I've seen several, trends, legal trends and society's trends that have developed that have increased companies' loss cost despite their best efforts to control them.
Yeah. And not only that, but what happens is driven up the D&O liability claim frequency and severity to the degree that these rate increases can't keep pace with the losses anymore.
And, an insurer, I mean, it's really hard for them to predict these social inflation trends, right? I mean, how can you predict this? It's really difficult to underwrite it and to price it, basically.
Exactly. And today, with the social and economic climate the way it is causing more people to believe that these corporations out there can't be trusted. And because they feel that way, they feel like institutions are not there for the benefit of them. When these juries get these opportunity in there, they often sympathize with the plaintiff. And then what they end up doing is just letting go. Basically, it causes these verdicts to reach numbers that we never heard of before, which causing the impact of the liability coverage.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And now, this has really, truly impacted community association. Because you look at community associations now, they become more diverse by ethnicity, race, religion, age, socioeconomic status. They all have to face a new set of issues they never had to face before.
Absolutely. And a failure by the association to properly address these issues head on could lead to serious issues involving libel, slander, discrimination, or harassment. And if they don't act on these issues, it can get very expensive.
Yeah. The failure to act is really, really important. Here's a situation, and this is one that bothers me to this very day. It's a case involving a male resident who kept harassing a female owner in a unit. He kept yelling at her racist and sexist remarks, constantly threatening her. She repeatedly complained to the association. The board failed to act, even though it was fully aware of the problem. She sued the association and even sought punitive damages. Once the association knew about the incident itself, it had a duty to get involved. The association acted what called reckless disregard of her rights. So the board was ordered to purchase her unit and pay damages. The total loss was over $1 million.
Wow, that's yeah. I mean, you definitely don't want to ignore a situation like that or any situation similar to that. So this individual harassment claim cost that association a lot of money. They can be very expensive.
Yeah, harassment is a really, truly major problem in community associations. And in California, it defines harassment as an unlawful violence, a credible threat of violence, a knowing and willful course of conduct directed at a specific person that seriously alarms, annoys, harasses the person that serves no legitimate purpose. So they're doing it just because they have no reason to do it. Let me give you an example, and this is one that a lot of people will be familiar with. Okay, a complaint was made against the board members because one board member was asked not to wear a baseball cap promoting a candidate for president.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, of course, he brought his First Amendment right to free speech, but the problem is that kind of free speech should not be inside the boardroom. It should be, left there. And then when he go outside, he can have the free speech he wants to. But again, that created a problem. The board wasn't aware of this thing, and then he created a problem and created a problem and created a problem. Let me give you another example. He had a resident in a active adult community of 55 plus, and they placed a Black Lives Matter sign in her bedroom window. She received a call from the homeowner president asking them to take the sign down because the unit behind them wants to sell the unit and believe because that sign is there, it would lower or ruin the sale in general.
Yeah, I mean, all these situations come up all the time. And, the problem with these society's issues is that we want to ignore them, and board members kind of, say, well, I don't want to deal with this. And they're unsure how to deal with it, especially if a resident who's harassing somebody else. Some are afraid that the individual will shift their attention and start attacking them. So they hope that the bad behavior, they kind of like push it under the rug and hope it'll just go away on its own. The problem is it usually doesn't. And, as we said before, a failure to act can be very expensive.
Yeah, and that's the point. When we talk about this social inflation thing, it is a really something new and something that we're taking a look at and understanding the fact that we're seeing claims go up. We see the loss trend, the cost of loss is increasing more and more over the past 3 or 4 years. It's happening to all liability across the board. General liability, umbrella, auto is where it first started. So again, social is number 2. It is really a major problem. So let's go to the
Okay, great. And I did want to take a second here to remind everybody that if you look at the questions box on the right side of your screen, if you have any questions for us regarding the material that we're going over, feel free to type your questions in before we get to the end, and then we'll answer your questions at the end of today's webinar. And again, if we don't have any time to answer your question, don't worry. We'll give you a call or send you an email later on. And I record all of our webinars. They're in a recording, and I put them on our website, which is kdisonline.com. Okay, great. So now we're going to talk about the increase in enforcement challenges that associations are facing.
As I said earlier, the board's exposure to liability loss has increased due to the awareness of individuals and how they should be treated. And that's what we're talking about. So this has led to an increase in enforcement challenges to the board based upon rules being either unfair, discriminatory, unreasonable, unenforceable.
Yeah, basically, Kevin, the people who live there believe they know their rights and they might feel that they're being treated unfairly. And, and many people have never read the governing documents or the CC&Rs. I know I read mine about 10 years ago, or they haven't attended a board meeting, so they just feel like, oh, why are they picking on me? Because I want to paint my house purple or something,
Yeah, and with the rise of COVID-19 issues and social inflation issues, the number of claims have risen significantly. Here's like our famous example, right? The association documents restrict colors. Okay, so a person wants to paint their house brown. The association notifies them that the color was not approved and he must change it. However, the person who wants to paint their house realizes that in the complex there are other brown houses in there. And so now the owner sues for breach of fiduciary duty, arbitrary enforcement of the documents, and guess what they throw in? Discrimination.
So it's a multifaceted claim. That's many, many different areas that are covered. So basically that brings in social inflation again.
Yeah, it is, because what happens is now you're having situations where the people who live in these community associations and they believe that they're being mistreated and everything also say that I'm part of a protected class. And as a protected class, I should be giving more than it was before. So it's really something that we see this trend is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Let me give you another example here. This involved a unit upstairs unit who just installed hardwood floors. Okay. Now we know that we have hardwood floors upstairs. The guy downstairs doesn't like it and start complaining. Well, the guy who put the hardwood floors there said we can't, we have to have hardwood floors because we have allergies.
Okay.
Allergies. Yep. And so now all of a sudden the person downstairs, when the person get rid of the hardwood floor says I have allergies. So the board wanted to amend the CC&R to prohibit hardwood floors. That's what they said. There, nobody can do it. But again, the problem was that the board was unaware that if someone has these allergies, you must have reasonably accommodate their request.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets rather complicated when somebody has allergies and noise from the hardwood floors, and you've got multiple issues going on.
Yeah, and so what you have to do is figure out how do you keep both of them happy. You can let her keep hardwood floors, okay, as long as, first of all, you need a healthcare letter that says, that you have these allergies and everything. But they also either have to prepare for the person at the bottom, either by installing hyperallergenic rugs throughout her unit or reinstalling the hardwood floors. But you can't just say, no at all, and you can't just not do anything at all. But again, what happens is if they don't take appropriate action, the right action at all, lawsuits against the association exist. And again, you have, failure to enforce the documents. Now, from a historical point of view, failure to enforce the documents are about my right to put up the deck or the satellite or the basketball court or whatever. Now we have expanded it by saying the reason why you're doing this arbitrarily is because I'm a protected class. The reason why you're harassing me is because I'm a protected class. It has expanded over the past several years, something that's new, something that has new for me, because after doing this for 30 years, I have not seen a rise as I've seen it recently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and as we talked about before, the failure to act, if the board doesn't take the appropriate action, then it could end up in a lawsuit against the association by an owner for failure to enforce the documents. So there's so many different issues that come up in associations, like you mentioned, painting a house a certain color, flying a flag. I had a neighbor who was flying his college football flag, for his team. And they asked him to take the flag down. So, there's a lot of multiple issues that come up when you have a lot of people living in a neighborhood and people just don't know the rules.
And that's why it's important to really understand your D&O policy, what it provides and what it doesn't provide, to make sure that if one of these situations arises, you can get some kind of coverage, And what we're talking about here is a couple of things. We're talking about a broad definition of insured, claim, and wrongful act. Nothing more important than that. Because you're insured, you got to include all your volunteers, your committee members, your board of directors, your past board members, your current board members. A claim has to be for monetary and non-monetary losses. So it has to be for things that are claimed against the board of directors. It has to be for a wrongful act. And wrongful act has to be broader than just error, omission, or misstatement. It has to be for any act. So it has to be really broad there. And the definition of claim has to be broad enough to not only pick up money, non-monetary damages, but also criminal proceedings. I mean, we had a situation, a claim years ago when a criminal complaint was made against unit owners for installing window guards improperly. So these definitions are really critically important now more so than ever. Personal liability, personal injury, public liability, again, important. A lot of it's covered in your general liability policy, but with liability coverage shrinking, you may end up not having in there. Non-money damages, we just talked about. Noise exclusion. Again, we just had a noise exclusion we talked about where the hypoallergenic rugs should be placed under there. Noise is a big problem. People want hardwood floors. Right? Discrimination exclusion. Again, we're talking about things like social inflation, discrimination, got to have that coverage. Employment practices, got to have employment practices. Insured versus insured, okay? You get into situations where you have one board member will sue another board member, you got to have this coverage. Breach of contract. It's one of those things where you talk about, I entered a contract with the landscaper. Now all of a sudden the landscaper can't come on the premises because of we're not allowing anybody in unless they have the temperature check or they have a mask. We're not letting them in. So now you have a problem with the contract there with the landscaper or the roofer or whatever you have. So that can be an issue there. And then we have this one that's interesting to me, is the failure to maintain or procure insurance. This is interesting because historically it's been on every D&O policy. We took it off our policy years ago because there's a situation with I'm a unit owner and I want the association to buy earthquake insurance because I live in Southern California. They decided to do it, and I decided to sue them for failure to not have enough earthquake insurance before the earthquake, which is a lot different than suing them after the earthquake because of property damage. The same thing for COVID-19. If I sue the board for not having proper COVID insurance versus having you have the bodily injury, sickness, disease, or death, you're talking about something totally different. The failure to maintain and procure insurance exclusion helps board of directors if they're sued for something that, again, a decision that they decide to make, a business decision they decide to make. So these are your coverages you have to have under your D&O policies in order to have the proper coverage, especially in today's environment, because today's environment has changed. It's changed rapidly and is expanding more and more and more.
Absolutely. And especially in the last 3 to 4 months, the whole world has changed and insurance is catching up to it, but it just changed so quickly. I don't think anybody expected it to happen overnight like this. And yeah, there's much more going on right now in the insurance world and in every industry. I did want to mention one more time that we're coming to the summary section of today's webinar. If you have any questions about what we're going over today, feel free to send your questions in. Just type them into the questions box right now, and we'll answer your questions at the end. I do have one question that came in. Craig, thank you so much. I'll be answering your question when we're done with the summary. And now, Kevin, to summarize today's webinar up, we're basically talking about the community association board roles and responsibilities have really evolved. I mean, there's just so much more to it now than there ever was before, and everybody can understand that. And
you should talk about the health, safety, and welfare, and that's the difference. Where historically they were business people, their job was to come and have their board of directors meeting, make sure they enforced the rules, make sure they budget, make sure they did those necessary things to run the association. Now they have a whole new job they didn't have before. And that is that they lack the experience, knowledge, and expertise to really do the job they have to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, enforcing it is much more challenging now. Everything's much more challenging than it was before. Great.
And the key thing is just to make sure at the end of the day, you have the right insurance policy so that when these things happen, you get defense costs, you get some judgments and settlement, just in case it does come into play. So it's really, really important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Great. Okay, let's see. Now we have a question from Craig. Craig would, okay, I actually have a question here from Brian. Okay, thank you, Brian. Thanks for your question so much. Brian would like to know, given that D&O premiums are on average very low, how close do you think we are to seeing more exclusions introduced in addition to the rate increases? Great question, Brian. Taking rate on a low premium product seems unlikely to address the underlying issue of ultra broad coverage and increasing claim costs from that broad coverage.
Yeah. Okay, that's a great question. In fact, this is a question that we look at all the time. Every year we sit down, or probably do it every quarter, we look at what's going on in community associations out there. And again, you look at $1,000 policy, a $1,200 policy, you end up with an average of $15,000, $20,000 claim. It is, and now what happens, what social inflation does is that claim we spend $10,000 for now is like $30,000 or $40,000. And if there's judgment, the judgment before may have been $100,000. Now it's like $500,000, $750,000. So, and then you have to decide, do you want to go to court or not with it? Because you know what's going on out there, so you might want to settle it. So it really is complicated. Will coverages be restricted? Will premiums go through the roof? Only time will tell. I mean, our job is to present this information to you to let you know this is the trends. This is what we're seeing right now. And as a result, it will impact your future.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for that question. And Craig would like to know, and I'm sure some other people would like to know, the PowerPoint slides. They won't be on our website, but I can email them to you. So I'll give out my email. It's sbranson@kdins.com. It's sbranson, which is BRANSON, at KD and then INS like insurance.com. Shoot me an email, and if you have any other questions as well, I can answer your questions, but I can also email you the PowerPoint slides. And again, the recording of today's webinar and all of our past webinars will be on our website, which is kdisonline.com. Great. Well, it looks like that might be it for questions for now. So thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us. We really appreciate it. And please join us in August as we do a very exciting Meet the Underwriter webinar.
Thanks a lot, Sherry.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks. Have a great afternoon and stay safe.